So hello there guys, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the DNF1 F1 Podcast, the independent F1 show made by the fans and for the fans, as we aim to bring you race reviews, previews and all of the latest talking points, gossip and events in the world of Formula 1, and we relay that back to you for your listening or viewing pleasure, depending of course on which platform that you choose to follow us on. And guys, I hope you're doing okay. I am certainly doing okay. We're well into the bank holiday weekend, as us in the UK are currently celebrating the 70th anniversary of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, from her coronation to the throne in 1952. So some of us get a lovely extra bank holiday as a result of that. But of course, congratulations to you, Your Majesty. I hope you are enjoying your anniversary as much as the rest of us are in the UK. But of course, guys, we are here to talk about Formula 1. And often this season, we have trialled a different series where I interview some of personnel in F1 or in other motorsport series to get their take on how they established their careers in motorsport, and of course a few other candid interests of theirs that you may not already know, and of course a little bit of a discussion about the F1 World Championship as well. And for this episode, I'm very excited to have on board one of the brand new faces of motorsport commentary, at least in the upper echelons. At least looking through his LinkedIn and some other bits online, there's quite a stack of experience there already, which is quite astounding. So I'm going to list a few of those a few of those off the tip of my tongue here. We've got currently one of the lead F1 commentators for BBC Radio 5 Live, lead FIA Formula 3 commentator, of course, Porsche Super Cup as well, presenter of the lead host of the Motormouth podcast, presenter of Motorsport, including MotoGP as well, and also did a bit of radio presenting and also a bit of voiceover work as well. And all of this before the age of 25. Incredible stuff. We've got Harry Benjamin here. Harry, first of all, how are you doing? And thanks very much for coming on the show.
Oh, I'm really well. Thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a bit embarrassing, not embarrassing, but hearing back like what you've done, I'm quite proud of it. But no, a pleasure to be on and chat a bit of motorsport.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely brilliant having you on. And as I said, I was mega impressed. Not to fanboy too much, but I was sort of looking through the list, and I was thinking, is this guy only 25? Like, wow, it's incredible.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can confirm I am 25, although my showbiz age is 21 and will remain so for 10 years at least. Yeah, well, I mean, I first sort of started going towards this route when I was 18. So the last year has been great because, you know, from a professional point of view, because the opportunities have kind of been coming really in the last year. But I am young, I suppose. Although I always think, well, look at bloody racing drivers, and you know, if you're 19 now, you're too old for F1. But you know, hopefully it's not quite the case on the broadcast side. But I've been working towards it since I was 18 years old, really. So it's for me, it's felt like it's been a sort of long graft, and still grafting to this day, really. Still trying to put myself out there and get more work and more experience and just enjoy the journey.
Absolutely. And I mean, it sounds great. And of course, you're absolutely right. You know, when you think about drivers, you often think as 25 as someone who's old. But when it comes from a broadcasting perspective, you're still practically a junior at this point, obviously still finding your way. And in your case, you've obviously come quite a long way in a short time. Is that I mean, you mentioned, of course, about enjoying it and putting yourself out there and doing as much as you can. I know this is something I'll probably ask a little bit later, but seeing as we're there, is this the sort of advice that you would give to young aspiring commentators or presenters that are trying to find their way? Perhaps they're 17, 18 years of age, and they don't quite know where they want to go in terms of how to achieve similar to what you've done so far already.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I get asked quite a lot now. I get a lot of messages being like, I want to do what you do. How do I do it? And I find it quite a difficult question to actually answer, because my route is very different to anybody else's. Every broadcaster or person within the broadcast team in motorsport has got a completely different route to how they got there, really. If you actually dig deep and go behind it, I can only give advice from what I've done. And that is, it is putting yourself out there. It is making sure you're, on top of everything that you want to be in. And creating your own content in this day and age is massive. It's one of those things where, the social media age certainly has catapulted careers. You look at people coming to fruition on TikTok and getting broadcast jobs out of it. So I say, put yourself out there, create your own content. It doesn't matter if you think nobody's watching it. If you're getting 1, 2, 3, 4 views, doesn't matter. If it's decent enough, it won't be amazing, but if it's decent, and if one of those people is a producer that stumbled across you somehow, then that's all you need. Or for instance, if you're not getting views, or if you are, you've got to make sure you're going out and finding those people, those important people, finding those opportunities, because no one's going to come to you when you're first starting out and give you your dream job. That's never going to happen. You've got to keep emailing people, pester people, and be like, hi, this is me. This is what I'm doing. This is what I want to do. I'd love some advice. Here's some stuff I've done recently on YouTube, or here's my TikTok. I've got 10,000 followers, or whatever. All that stuff is all really good stuff. And you just got to keep building on that kind of momentum.
So, I mean, that's fantastic, Harry. And as I was just saying, it's important for a lot of people that sort of was making F1 or motorsport content in particular. And I've seen so many new content creators come about, and even people asking me how to get into it or what's the best way to move forward with it. And I just say, look, just make your own content, make it something that's unique to yourself, something that you're passionate about, something you believe in, and pretty much echoing all the points that you've just made, that you just have to keep sticking at it. If you want to try and get great guests on the show like yourself, you can just constantly pester them. Fortunately, I didn't have to do that because you were kind enough to get back to me straight away. But it's never always as easy as that with some other people. And sometimes you just have to stick at it, be consistent, and then hopefully one day, for you, an opportunity will come to you, or you'll find that opportunity to go and do what you love, or at the very least, it ends up being a very decent hobby out of it as well. So,
totally. Another thing I might add is don't take things too personally. I know it's very difficult to not do that in this kind of industry when you're being judged on, what you look like, what you sound like, what you're doing. But you got to be able to try and develop, if you don't have one already, a fairly thick skin, and just don't take things personally. If you're not right, you're not right for it. And that's just the way it is. I think that it helps that I actually initially trained as an actor. So that, that's a very similar business. You're judged completely on what you look like, what you sound like, and whether you're the right fit for the part. And that's the same in broadcast as well. It's whether you're the right fit in the F1 team or in Channel 4 or whoever it might be. So, experience plays a massive part, but also there are factors beyond your control that you just have to sort of settle with and go, fine, that's not for me. I can't do anything about that. I'll move on and put my energy elsewhere.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think it's so important in a social media age where you do have to develop a thick skin, because not everybody's going to enjoy what you do. For whatever reason, there's always going to be someone out there that will have something to critique on, whether it's constructive or not. That can always vary, and sometimes more can be helpful than others on that one. But it certainly is one of those where I'd be disappointed if they receive negative comments, and we've had that on this show, that you just take it and you think, okay, well, that's fine. You just got to get on with it, or you learn from it and improve your show. That's the best way forward. I did have an icebreaker question, and for all of these episodes that I've done on F1 Chat, I've had a very terrible habit of not getting this in straight away. I often get distracted and focus on other points of the conversation. It's just how they often flow. So I'm going to throw it at you whilst I've still got a chance and whilst it's still relevant, Harry. But if I was able to give you a Formula One car and any car that you like, and obviously you're an expert driving it, you don't have to worry about learning it, so you've got a day to drive your dream F1 car, and you could take it to any circuit in the world, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a Formula One circuit. It could be a MotoGP circuit if you could fit it on there, or NASCAR, or any way you want to go. Where would you go, and what car would you drive?
Oh, that's really hard. The first track that popped into my mind was it's a toss-up between either the Nordschleife in Germany, which is very, if you're not too familiar, it's basically the Nürburgring, but that's the Grand Prix track, and then off and around it through the woods is the Nordschleife. It's an incredibly demanding track. That would be cool if I was capable enough to do it. And what was the other one? Bathurst came into mind as well. Ooh, ironically, neither on the F1 calendar, of course, but Bathurst, where the V8 supercars, Australia Championship races, that looks awesome, and I'm a bit of a sports car fan, and that just be amazing. I don't know how they keep it out the barrier. It's amazing. So it'd be a toss up between one of those two, and then The car's really difficult. I mean, it would probably have to be the Red Bull from 2012, Sebastian Vettel's championship winning car. And I know that's probably not that's probably a bit of a weird choice, but really 2012 was the first year I properly started watching Formula One, and it's the first year where I properly remember getting absolutely fanatical about it. And of course, Vettel was the champion in the end in what was one of the best seasons I think in the last decade. So that's probably what I would choose, just for sort of sentimental reasons, I think.
Yeah, I think if I remember right, that was the one where it obviously went to the final race in Brazil with Fernando Alonso, and he had that, and Vettel had that spin to the point where he did so well to avoid being taken out of the front and still recovered it towards the end and sealed that world championship. And it was an incredible season. I think it was one where we had like 6 different winners in the first 7 races as well. Absolutely crazy stuff. So yeah, I think that's a really good choice, to be fair, Harry. I mean, it's quite refreshing actually, because some of the interviews that I've done in the past, a lot of people have come at me with the 1988 or 89 McLaren with Senna and Prost. Obviously, I'm a big Ferrari fan, so obviously I went for like the F2004 and a few cars like that. So it's quite nice to get one of the modern day cars, or at least somewhat modern, I suppose. It's not that old.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was the year Pastor Maldonado won, and that came up the other day. Obviously, we were at the Spanish Grand Prix, and I was like, God, that was 10 years ago. God, I remember it like it was. Yes, now I understand when I meet some of my other colleagues who are, they are a bit older. They're way more experienced than I am, and they are, they know the 1980s, 1990s, and beforehand like the back of their hands. And now I kind of get when they refer to moments that they weren't, in Formula One working as, but they know because that's when they first became a fan. And that's the same with me back in 2012. And I do feel it's a bit of an odd situation to be in, because, I'm always upfront and honest. My knowledge of, the good old days of Formula One is not as good as some of my other colleagues might be, who are much older and experienced than me. I know a lot about it, but I wouldn't be able to just sort of reminisce about, the F2004 or Mika Hakkinen in a McLaren. I wouldn't be able to, because I was very, very young at the time. I would have only been, in the single figures. And also I didn't watch Formula One then. I don't come from a Formula One family or a sporty family or even a media or broadcast family at all. I didn't really like sport when I was young. And it wasn't until I sort of just discovered Formula One on a Sunday afternoon, watched my first ever race, which was actually, I think it was Belgium 2011, and just fell in love with it and became hooked instantly.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds great. And I think that's a really good point as well, because not a lot of people would expect, someone in your position to only get into Formula One relatively recently. And we're not too different. We're not too far apart in terms of age. I think I'm a few years older than you are, but my F1 history began, or my F1 interest began as early as the mid-90s when Michael Schumacher was still driving a Benetton. And that makes me feel old to say that, how long ago that was. I mean, I was a massive Formula 1 fan from a young age, but it's quite refreshing to see even people in the media now getting into Formula 1 as recently as, say, 2012 or the 2010s, which was a very good era in its own right. And it grows and influences people to a degree now where so many more people are taking it on, and it's brilliant to see. But it's quite interesting to hear about your story, Harry. I guess my next question to that would be, when did you decide that you wanted to become a presenter or a broadcaster? Was that something that came relatively late, or is this something that you always had an ambition for, even before you started following Formula One?
Well, when I was at school, I was all very much, I wanted to be an actor. I did drama A-level, and I applied to drama schools, and I did relentless auditions, and then I did get into a drama school. And at the same time, I was also doing this motorsport blog, which my school kind of encouraged me to do. We had these little sort of extracurricular classes where they encouraged you to develop journalistic skills. And I quite liked that side of things. And I just thought, I'll write a blog about motorsport. And it wasn't just about Formula One. It was about all kinds of motorsport in the end, because my fascination for F1 turned to DTM. And then I got interested in WEC and all these kind of other motorsports. So it wasn't always, I wasn't just Formula One. And then I went to drama school, and it was really when I was there, and I kind of realized I love acting. I love it. But it made me realize how much I missed doing any kind of motorsport related things, because when you're at drama school, it's very intense. It's not quite like university. There isn't, a radio or TV society. It's all very much focused on acting, quite rightly. And I realized then, I was like, well, what do I do? How do I put this sort of drama acting-y thing together with motorsport? And sort of journalism, and I sort of tried to think about how I could put those two together, and I did, and that kind of equaled, well, broadcaster, because I was all right at blogging. Like I would never say I was a bad writer, but I'm a much better talker. And I thought, well, there you go, that's what I should do. I should be a broadcaster. That seems to combine both of those two. And then, so yeah, when I was sort of 18, 19, that was when I kind of made the decision, right, that's the route I want to go down. That's where I'm going to try and head.
And I mean, that's really interesting. And of course, just looking through your LinkedIn just to do a bit of research on, there was quite a few different roles that you were hosting. Obviously, you were a radio presenter and host for a while. You were doing some voiceover work. And at what point did motorsport become a career path with you? So when did you get your first big break working in motorsport? Because it seemed a bit like a sort of a left-way move, if you don't mind me saying.
Yeah, I mean, well, there was never... I don't think there was ever really there are big breaks, but before your big break, which I don't know what class is a big break. There's lots of mini breaks along the way, really. And so when I was at drama school, I got some work experience at the weekend because I became fascinated with Formula E. When that in its first ever season, and I thought at the time, I was like, oh, F1's out the picture, like I'm never going to get in there, like it's Formula One, don't be stupid, Harry. Formula E, however, had just started, first ever season, and I thought, okay, get your foot in the door there early, it's brand new, that could be something. And I figured out who the production company was, and I sent emails off while I was supposed to be studying for my A-levels. And this was because this was just before I was going off to drama school. And then eventually I got, I said, okay, is there any, work experience, basically? And they said, if you can get yourself to Donington Park, you can come and spend a couple of days with us doing pre-season testing for Formula E. I said absolutely. So I got myself up there and I spent a couple of days with them as the work experience kid. And I was, running about, making people coffee and just sort of wandering about the place, seeing how a pit lane worked and what the production team did. And then I met Nikki Shields, who is the presenter and pit lane reporter for Formula E, and she was very kind, and I asked her for some advice. And then sort of since then, she became a little bit of a mentor for me, and was there constantly giving me advice. And I pestered her over email, and I updated her with what I was doing. She ended up putting me in touch with people she thought might be able to help. And then she offered me a bit of a job, really, helping her do her socials and her social media, and just sort of being involved in that world. So that was the first bit of motorsport stuff. And I've been doing that on and off now for about 7 years. So she became, a really nice, really good friend and a really good support as well. So to this day, even. And so that was the first sort of bit of motorsport bubbling in the background. And then I finished drama school, and I spent a few months not really knowing what I was going to do. And then I decided I was going to go to university, but my drama school course had ended in Easter. So there was a bit of time to kill in between sort of Easter and September when you start university. And I ended up saying to, getting looking for work experience, internships, and I found a production company that did 5 Live's Formula One coverage, amongst lots of other things. They did the Olivier Awards for Magic Radio, and they did entertainment and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, oh, this sounds cool. And they did a 1-month internship, paid, and I applied and got it. And then I was there for a month doing everything, from the very low level to learning how to edit, and those people in that company I still know to this day, and we're still friends. And they really, they set me up for an amazing start. Really, they were a brilliant company to get in with so early on. But I was only there for a month, and then I went off to university. And it was when I was at university that kind of motorsport took a little bit of a back seat, because it's just difficult to do when you're at university. And I focused on radio. I'd gotten into radio during my time at that intern company, and I joined the Radio Society. At first, I was doing a few motorsport reports on the sports radio show, and then I got my own sort of entertainment breakfast radio show. And I was just doing that and loving it and chatting about music and playing games. And then that led to, I was fairly good at it. And then that led to being a part of the Student Radio Conference, which is run by the Student Radio Association. And they do this competition called Demo Factor, which is very much like X Factor, but with demos. And you submit your demo and it's judged by these top tier people in radio. And I didn't win, but I came third. And I got the chance to go and do work for Absolute Radio. And suddenly I was being a bit of a radio producer. And then I ended up somehow being the assistant producer on the Dave Berry Breakfast Show, which was ridiculous. At the time, it was the biggest national breakfast show in the UK. And I was assistant producing it because I'd done an all right job and they needed last minute cover. And I didn't really know how to edit or anything like that. I wasn't that good at it. But another piece of advice, say yes to everything, figure out how to do it later. And I did figure it out and just about got through it. And then eventually I was still at uni all of this time. And then I got a job through sending a demo off at a station called Hits Radio, which was a sister station to Absolute Radio. And that was actually based up in Manchester at the time. So I was commuting, which was a bit of a long slog, but I got the chance to be a national radio broadcaster for a year, doing all kinds of shows, the weekend overnight shifts, the Friday night parties, weekday mornings, breakfast show, everything, drive time. And then that was sort of, I was in entertainment presenter mode, really. And then, sorry, I know I'm barking on forever, but we're now at the point where I come back to motorsport. And it was at this time I was realizing, as much as I love doing this entertainment radio presenting, I was missing motorsport. I was missing talking about it. I wasn't doing anything with it really. And I was just like, I wanted to get back into it. And then an opportunity came along with someone who's now become a friend, Tim Sylvie, and to do a podcast called Motormouth. And I jumped at the chance to create and develop this podcast and make it a bit like, I describe it as Piers Morgan's life stories, but without the Piers Morgan and mainly about motorsport. And I started doing that. And that got me back into the motorsport world. And that grew and grew and grew and continued to grow even in COVID. And we started to get really high profile guests. And at this stage, I'd left my radio job. I'd graduated university. And then I was full focus in the podcast. And then, right, okay, how do I get back into motorsport? How do I grow from here? And that was sort of the early kind of stages of it and how I got into motorsport.
Well, I mean, it sounds great. And I'm a big fan of the Motormouth podcast. I've listened to quite a lot of your shows now. I got into it a few months back and I was kind of sold on the description. You said Piers Morgan life stories without the Piers Morgan and a bit of motorsport as well. So I think that's a selling point for many people that haven't already checked it out. Definitely recommend go checking it out. I think that's on most podcasting platforms. I usually follow on Spotify anyway. So yeah, definitely check that out. Some really, really good stuff on there. And obviously from podcasting, you've obviously mentioned getting into motorsport, and you've done quite a few gigs in motorsport. Obviously been commentating on GT racing. Recently you did the Ferrari challenge as well, obviously do some MotoGP stuff. At what point did you start to sort of take a step back and realize how much you were actually doing? Because I'm just listening to all of that and reading through it and thinking to myself, first of all, did you get nervous at any point throughout this? Because obviously you're coming across a very confident and well-spoken and obviously professional broadcaster, and I'm just sort of thinking to myself, how do you handle the nerves? How do you handle dealing with situations where you're reporting live to so many people that obviously you've already mentioned the feedback that so many people will give you on social media? Does any of that sort of go through your mind when you're live on a broadcast?
No, I'll be honest. I do get nervous. Well, I did when I first started. Like when I did my first ever Porsche Super Cup race. That was really my first ever commentary. Was Porsche Super Cup, and that's run by Formula One. So you're in the F1 building. You're being produced and directed by the same people that do F3, F2, and F1. In case that's how it works in terms of behind the scenes. I was really nervous the night before. I was like, well, your tummy's going and you're not going to get any sleep and you wake up super early because you feel like you're going to miss your alarm. And I'd been prepping for months on Porsche Super Cup. So I was the expert in all things Porsche, and every single driver, I had something on them. I knew their life story. And so I made sure, I really did the work. But when you get in the room, or at least when I do, and you sit down and you put your headphones on and you kind of just engage a broadcaster mode, really, because I'm not like that all the time. And because you can't be, it's exhausting. But so you engage broadcaster mode, and you start. You're professional. You're in your job, and you're there to provide. I believe I'm there to provide a bit of entertainment and to tell the story of the race, and as best as I can, in conjunction with my producers who are talking to me the entire time in my ear. So while I'm talking, I've got a million voices in my ear telling me what's going on, things I need to do, if I need to say anything or whatever. So I think it's just a case of you forget that you're broadcasting to however many people it is. I never think, God, this is going out to so many people. I never do. It just never crosses my mind. I know, I get a fair few like tweets and whatever during a race weekend. Some nice, well, the majority are nice. I've only received a few, horrible ones, but you laugh at them. So it's not really something I think about too much at the moment because, it felt natural to do it. If I'm brutally honest, I felt like by the time I got the chance to be, certainly by the time I got the chance to do my Formula One debut with 5 Live earlier this year, of course I was nervous, but and that was a big deal because that was BBC, that was 5 Live, that was the dream had always been BBC Formula One, and a lot of people ask me, God, how did you even get words out of your mouth? But you just go into this mode when you start, and you have to work hard for it. I felt prepped, and I said, I was chatting to Jenny Gow afterwards. She went, "Did you enjoy it?" And I went, "I loved it." And I felt ready for it. I felt like I'd done the work. I'd had some great experiences, and I just felt ready. It felt natural.
I mean, I remember listening to that, and not to blow smoke on this show, Harry, but I thought you did a great job, and I can totally understand and relate to, obviously not to that scale, but how you can feel nervous about. You do your prep work, you definitely feel like you're ready, and then you're sort of worrying, oh, what if I say the wrong thing, or if I say something stupid, or get my words muddled up, and you sort of worry that you go down a downward spiral after that. But the best advice, as you just mentioned, is you just got to get on with it, and you just embrace it and enjoy it for what it is. And I speak for myself. I'm sure I'd expect to hear you on many more of those broadcasts coming in the future. I mean, unless I'm mistaken, I heard you were doing quite a few this year for Radio 5 Live. Is that right?
I'm just doing a few. Because Jack Nicholls obviously is the main commentator, and he's doing some Formula E. So there's a few clashes there. So I've done Australia. So my next one will be the British Grand Prix, which I'm really excited for. And then I'm doing Hungary as well. So just 3 F1 for 5 Live at the moment. But obviously the British Grand Prix will be amazing. I'll get to be trackside, and I'll be annoying everybody on that one because I'll be doing F1, F3 and Porsche all weekend long. So that will be a very busy weekend. But no, absolutely, you're right. And I get very nervous, and I have that voice of doubt in my head. Oh my God, I feel like maybe have I not worked hard enough? Have I, can I remember that piece of information? Or did I muddle my words up there? Or that sounded stupid? Did I say the wrong thing? Did I ask a stupid question? Am I cut out for this? You have those moments of doubts. Am I going to get found out because I didn't watch Motorsport from 1980? I was only born in 1997, but you have those stupid, things in your mind. So yeah, of course, all those things come into you. But when you have the countdown in your headphones and it's 3, 2, 1 cue commentary, you just go and you forget it all, and you just react to what's coming at you in the moment.
Yeah, that sounds great. And I guess my next question would be, based on everything that we've already discussed already as in your experience as a commentator and presenter, is have you had to commentate on anything where you didn't feel fully prepared for, or it was like a last minute thing and all of a sudden you feel like, oh, what do I say? I don't know as much as I'd like to about a subject like this.
Yes. Formula 2, Silverstone, parachuted in on the Saturday, bearing in mind they'd already done practice and qualifying on the Friday. This was last year at the British Grand Prix. And I think I can say this now. Jordan King was supposed to be doing co-commentary, but he got COVID and so had to back out. And I got a call on Friday night. Friday night, confirming, can you be co-commentator? So can you be the Jordan King, essentially, with Rosanna Tennant, who was on lead comms for Formula 2. Her first time doing Formula 2, my first time doing Formula 2 co-commentary. Now, obviously, I watch Formula 2 very regularly and I'm very up to speed on it, but it's very different suddenly when you've got to become the commentator than just watching it on the sofa. You'd have to have those little extra tidbits of info, which I didn't have. I worked all night. I stayed up till about 3 a.m. Trying to get my head around, every single driver, just to make sure, I knew something about them. Even the ones that were at the back of the field, you've got to know stuff about them. You can't just say, oh, just because he finished P25 doesn't mean he's not going to end up leading a race at some point. So that was probably one where I felt a little bit unprepared for, but that's when you thrive, when you're dropped in at the deep end, which has happened to me more often than not. That's where most of my kind of breaks have come from, where I've just been asked last minute, can you do this? It was the same with Formula 3, my first ever Formula 3 race in Austria last year. I was asked I was given maybe a day's notice for that one. And that's a field of 30 cars, So those are the occasions where you've got to rely on, your general passion for motorsport, which will hopefully see you through on top of any last minute bits of preparation you can do. Because when I first got Super Cup, I had 2 months to prepare for that one. So I felt sound. I knew something about every single driver, asked me anything Super Cup related, and I got you. Whereas when it came to particularly that F2 Silverstone one, that was a little bit of a, let's just see how this one goes.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of go through your head. You're thinking, right, I'm live on Sky Sports. It's Silverstone. It's F2. Does it all sort of go through your head before you get that countdown?
The only people I'm thinking about are my boss. Well, not like I'm thinking about them, but the only people I care about are my bosses, to be quite frank. Obviously, I care about providing a good show to the viewer and making sure I'm delivering all the information as accurately and as and keeping the show alive. I come from an entertainment background, and I know some people perhaps disagree with this way of approaching commentary, but I do believe that I'm there to inform and entertain. And I'm not there if it's a dry, boring race. Then yes, you can't flog a dead horse, but also you can make things a little bit more exciting if they're not completely as they are, which is why you have commentary in the first place. But as long as my bosses are happy, I'm happy, and they're the ones that give me feedback. They're the ones that give me the opportunity. They're the ones that give me my constructive criticism, and so they're the people that I'm sort of as long as they're happy, I'm happy. And usually, if they're happy, that means the people watching at home on telly are happy as well. So I'll just keep doing that.
yeah, very much so. And what would you say? How would you describe your commentary style? Because I grew up remembering the late Murray Walker do F1 commentary up until the early 2000s when he retired, and it was obviously a very unique style that a lot of people revered. And one of the things I often reminisce when it comes to thinking of how Murray Walker's style was is that he was a commentator that obviously made mistakes. We all do, we're human, but he was revered for those mistakes, Murrayisms that they were referred to. That's how popular he was. But obviously in the modern day with social media and other things like that, I hear you might get the odd mistake that a commentator might make, and I will see a flurry of people on social media either trying to point it out or trying to be very clever about it. How would you sum up your style of commentary in that regard? Is it something that you probably find a better way of asking this question whilst I'm trying to contradict myself? No, I'm going to ask that question again, if that's, or do you want to give an answer to that actually?
I can give an answer. I think I know what you're getting at. And well, to answer the first part in terms of, Murray Walker and the mistakes he made, and you're right, they were affectionate. He had a lot harder task though, because there was no social media or internet that you could research things, and probably no TV screens for a lot of his early years of commentary. He's relying. I think he used to find out who was leading with a stopwatch. So now we're blessed. I've got 2 screens in front of me. I've got my Twitter at the touch of a hand. I can log on to a driver's Instagram and find out what they did on Tuesday, and that might be useful to say, whereas Murray Walker would not have had that whatsoever. So a mistake from the commentary side in the modern era you're vilified for it in a way. But I think that's unfair because we are all human. We do make mistakes. It's much easier to call a race from your sofa than it is in the commentary box. I've figured that one out because most people at home have lovely 50-inch TV screens or whatever. Commentary, you really don't have that luxury, surprisingly. Yeah, you've got some screens and data, but they're tiny, so you do miss things. And also you can't look at the whole grid. You can't, especially on a start. So in Formula 3 and 30 cars, I can't tell you what's happening at the back during turn one. I can't because I've only got two eyes and I'm looking at what's happening at the front. So, I've got to make sure I get that right. And if I get it wrong, I get it wrong. And I'll try and recover and make an apology or some form of just correcting myself on air because I'm not a robot. I'm Harry Benjamin. I like to think I'm your mate that's guiding you through the race as well. So I'll hold my hands up and, go, oh, sorry, that wasn't whoever it was. That was this guy. But let's move on. That happens. As long as you're not doing it too regularly, then I think you're okay. But yeah, you do get vilified. And in terms of style, I don't really know what my style is. I have no idea. Partly because commentary was never the plan. So I never really set out to be a commentator, for instance. But Alex Jakes before me is one of the best. And I really like Jack Nicholls' style of commentary as well. And his really sort of funny, relaxed, casual approach to it. I really love that style. So I like to think I'm somewhere in between him and Alex Jakes. Maybe, I don't know. But, I don't really control what I say. It just sort of comes out in my tone as if I would be watching at home. So I can't really answer that question. Maybe you can tell me what my style is, but I don't know.
The funny thing is, Harry, is before I completely butchered that third question, I sort of tried asking 2 or 3 questions at once there, but before I butchered that last part about commentary style, in my notes, I actually mentioned that your style is quite similar to Alex Jakes and Jack Nicholls, which I think is quite appropriate given that obviously Alex is your predecessor from F3. Obviously you've taken over that role, and for me, it's very much a story that you're telling everyone. It's almost like you're narrating the opening plot for a story. You're setting the scene as the broadcast goes live. You can see the backdrop, the background at the circuit we're at. You paint the picture as if someone's come across Formula 3 or Formula 1 for the first time and thinking, okay, I'm here. What's the story? What's happening? What is the situation? Here are our protagonists, all those drivers fighting out, and I'm going to guide you through this race. Almost as if... pretty much almost as if you're watching it with them. And I think that's a brand of commentary that we see quite a lot these days. And some of the best commentators, you've mentioned Alex, you've mentioned Jack, obviously Crofty does that as well for Formula 1. So I would certainly, if I was to assess what your style would be from what I've heard watching Formula 3 this season, I certainly would compare it to the likes of Alex and Jack in particular. So, I'm enjoying it. It almost seemed quite seamless that when you came onto the scene in F3 at the start of the season, it took me about 5-10 minutes before I realised that someone else was actually commentating until your name came up on the graphic. I thought Alex Jakes was commentating on there, but it just, and I suppose I can mean that in a compliment because I agree. I think Alex is one of the best in the business. I will get him on this show at some point. He's someone that I have been bugging quite a lot, but he's a very busy man, so I can certainly appreciate that, of course. So yeah, that would be my assessment of your style in commentary. Is that something that you work on a lot, or is that just something that comes quite natural to you?
No, I don't plan it. I just speak how I speak, really. And you come up with your own little phrases like your lights out and away we go, and whatever else. But and you're there to highlight key moments, certainly overtakes, and then make sure you nail those. And there's a few common phrases that I think a lot of commentators use as well. Tucks back in behind him, can't find a way through there, has to try again, all those kind of things. But in general, I think you're just there. You're just talking through the race. I'm doing it for myself more than anybody else. And the one thing that doing the radio broadcast has taught me is, you have to describe that in a lot of detail, obviously, because people listening to Five Live can't see the cast usually, unless they're syncing it up. But usually they're in their car traveling somewhere and they want to listen to the race. So you have to be a lot more descriptive, and you have to be a lot more, forthright with what's going on track. And I actually quite like I'm actively trying to bring that style of commentary into my TV broadcast commentary, because I just feel even when you can see the action, it just brings that little more I don't know. I just think it brings a little something else, when you're saying, and that's, particularly in Formula 3, when there's so many different cars and liveries, getting sure, painting the picture of, then the orange Van Amersfoort racing car skirts past the blue Carlin, and just that kind of, I just think it gives it a little bit of an extra oomph. And when you actually, because it's very easy to take for granted in the TV commentary, that the viewer can see it at home. So you don't have to say, and this left front has connected with this right rear and they've interlocked, because you can see that. But whereas on 5 Live, you do have to say that because they have no idea what's happened. And they're trying to picture it in their minds. But I think a radio broadcast style really works quite nicely on a TV commentary one as well. So that in terms of actively working on that is something I do very much do. But in terms of my actual style and what I say in a generic way, I don't really practice that. It just kind of happens.
I'm just sort of imagining the scene as you're describing that, and obviously with the junior categories, I can only think that probably a commentator's worst nightmare when they commentate on the junior series is realizing how many Red Bull junior drivers actually participate, because they all drive around with a Red Bull livery. So in my mind, I think, I do feel for you guys, honestly, because you're commentating on there. And I did this the other day. I was watching Monaco and I was watching the F2 race, and I'm seeing Dennis Hauger obviously go through his alternate strategy and how that didn't work out for him. And I thought at first it did, but then I realized, actually, that's Jay and Derivela. And I'm thinking, wow, it's a good thing I'm not on commentary, because I was just talking to someone as if it was like Hauger's got a great strategy, and I realised he's actually held back, and I was talking about his teammates. So I can only sympathise with you guys when you see a Red Bull car and you're thinking, okay, that's one of about 6 or 7.
Yeah, I mean, part of the role of commentator, certainly pre-season, is particularly when there's maybe 4 or 5 Red Bull liveried cars on the grid, is they're all slightly different. So you've got to try to find something like Hauger has these green tips on his rear wing and the front end plates, and that distinguishes him from Jehan Deruvela or whoever it might be, Yumu Iwasa. In Formula 3, there were 4 at the start of the season. Sadly, Johnny Edgar had to pull out for health reasons, but actually Johnny's car, they're all Red Bull liveried, but Johnny had a slightly different finish in terms of they painted it in a slightly different style of blue, so it was slightly lighter actually. So that's how you could distinguish that one. And then you have Isaac Hadjar and Jack Crawford as the other 2 Red Bull rookies at the front of the field. So again, then you rely on what's can you see their helmet or or their number, or equally in my commentary position, you do have a timing screen right next to you, which can of course help.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important, obviously, that those are the things that I try to look for, those certain fine details between one driver and another. But sometimes you're halfway through a race, I'm sitting there, I'm not paying attention to half of it, and I'm thinking, oh God, I've confused him. There's just so much Red Bull. There really is. But, it just shows how great the Academy is. It's got so much talent in there. Speaking of F3, so far we've only had a few rounds so far this season, and I think a lot of F1 fans that may not watch the junior series, the one thing they'll probably ask someone with the inside track is, which of these drivers in the field looks like they might have the potential to be in F1 one day? Not to put you on the spot, because I know from a professional capacity, so you have to be impartial, of course, you can't have any favourites, but is there anyone that sort of catches your eyes of thinking this guy in particular might have a future, or perhaps a cluster of them, if you like?
There's a lot of good talent in Formula 3 this year. There really is. It's so hard to, currently leading the title at the moment is Victor Martin, who is backed by the Alpine Formula 1 team. He's in his second, he's the highest returning driver from last year, so he's not a rookie. So, he's got a bit more experience to his belt. He has to perform this year to make the step up to Formula 2 if he wants to try and get to Formula 1. And at the moment, he is doing so. The same goes for Arthur Leclerc, although he's got a bit more time on his side, I think. And of course, he's got a good last name, brother of Charles. But at the moment, he hasn't had a win on the board yet, so that's kind of putting him a bit further back in the pack. But the Formula 3 this year, it's the rookies that have absolutely blown everyone's mind, particularly Isaac Hadjar, the Frenchman. He's about 16, 17 years old. Backed by Red Bull, he is fast. He is already got a win on the board, 2 podiums. He should have had another podium actually earlier on this year. He's 4th in the standings, and we're only 3 rounds in. He's exceptional. And the other guy I would say is another Red Bull back driver, and perhaps he's got the right passport as well at the moment, is a guy called Jack Crawford, who is an American and is backed by Red Bull and is super fast, super quick. And I actually first met him when I was doing a series called Euro Formula Open, which is essentially a bit like Spanish Formula 3. It's a bit of a ring down from there. But Jack was doing that last year alongside F3 too, and I was doing Euro Formula, and that's when I met Jack. And he's so mature. He's six. These kids they're 16. They're kids, but they're more mature than you or I probably. And it's mind-blowing. So I would probably say Jack Crawford, Isaac Hadjar, Ollie Behrman, another name to throw into the mix there. He's really good. Franco Colapinto, another rookie who's come onto the scene and has been mightily quick. And he's got sports car experience on his background as well. Zane Maloney, he's from Barbados. His first ever year. He's had a bit of hard luck at the moment, but he is so fast. You can't pick one. And the issue is, of course, when you get to Formula One, there are only 20 seats on the grid. And people are going to fall by the wayside. So it's not all about how well you perform. You've got to have so many other factors going for you as well. But in terms of names to watch out for, those are a couple that, if you're watching Formula 3, I would keep an eye on them.
Yeah, I certainly agree that, Victor Martins is one that has stood out for me, and he's got that experience as well. So I almost feel like this is a year where, even though he is currently winning the F3 Championship, I really hope personally that he goes on to win it, because I feel like he needs to make that step up. He's more than good enough to make that step up into F2, and maybe F1, of course, still part of the Alpine Academy as well. So obviously looking ahead going forward. So, Colapinto, in my opinion, has got one of the best names in junior Formula right now.
Great,
so certainly it's such a great name, especially one to say on a broadcast. It just rolls off your tongue so easily. A name like that, I'm sure many people will keep an eye out for drivers like that. But of course, as you said, Arthur Leclerc, another driver, great name, of course. Younger brother of Charles Leclerc, obviously narrowly missed out in Monaco this weekend, unfortunately. But certainly plenty of talent in there as well. And of course, the same goes for F2 and obviously other series as well. Getting to Formula 1, it's massively stacked. And we just don't seem to have enough seats for these young talents in F1. So many talent. We saw Callum Ilott, a driver that I had a lot of time for when he was in F2. Of course, a couple of years ago, competing with Mick Schumacher, not only for the title, but in the Ferrari Academy. He missed out owing to Nikita Mazepin having his seat instead, arguably, and he's racing in the Indy 500. So I suppose the takeaway is that there are other avenues for some of these young guys if they don't get into Formula 1, because I don't know about you, Harry, I'm not really seeing the grid getting any bigger anytime soon, just because of the current stalemate we have between the teams and what the teams want and what the fans want.
Certainly, and just before, and just this week, Red Bull have announced Sergio Perez has extended his contract till 2024. That locks up Red Bull. What happens to Pierre Gasly and Yuki Tsunoda then for the next couple of years? Who leaves? Who comes through? Red Bull are going to have a problem that Alpine are currently experiencing with their academy. They had to let Zhou Guanyu go to Alfa Romeo. They've got Oscar Piastri, F3, F2 winner, on the sidelines doing nothing at the moment. Of course, he's doing work, but he's not in a racing car, and to him, that's doing nothing. What do they do with a talent like Oscar Piastri when you've got Fernando Alonso and Esteban Ocon on your car? There's not enough seats, and that's why I think I had this conversation the other day, especially with some of the Ferrari driver academy members. Ferrari locked in Leclerc and Sainz for the next few years, and you look at what's going on at Alfa Romeo, where they kind of seem to have knocked off their Ferrari links at the moment. Haas, they've got Mick Schumacher in the car, but Mick's not really performing at the moment, but he's got the surname. And Kevin Magnussen alongside, he's the experienced head and he brings a bit of dollar as well. So where is the next gap for a Ferrari young driver? Is it if it's not Formula One, where else could it be? Could it be in the World Endurance Championship in Ferrari's new hypercar program, which looks set to be absolutely incredible, which is why I think these F3 drivers need to realize, and I'm sure many of them do, that F1 might not be achievable, but it's still worth, knocking at the doors of these Formula One teams, because I could get in with Ferrari and then they could give me a very nice career in the World Endurance Championship. For the sake of putting a hypothetical situation, we've heard this touted around a few times, but if you were a team boss in that position, and obviously you wanted to be defensive of your brand, you want to be protective of your team in terms of revenue, because ultimately it comes down to protecting revenue and not sharing it with an 11th team, theoretically, like Andretti, for example, that wants to come into Formula One. Would you entertain the idea of free car teams? Because in a way,
if that was, obviously, that's going to cost a bit of extra money, they'd have to raise the budget cap, but if that was affordable and it was just a matter of bringing money in and protecting what you got, or your share, if you like, is that something that you would seriously entertain as an opportunity to bring in at least another 10 drivers that may otherwise not have opportunities in the sport?
Yeah, I'd be down for that. I'm keen in whatever capacity to get more drivers onto the grid. I'm more of a fan of getting at least 2 more teams onto the grid. I know there's the news, obviously, with Porsche and Audi, but they're not coming onto the grid as new teams. They're joining existing ones. And so to me, that's, well, okay, great to have those brands involved, but I'd prefer it if they were providing 4 extra seats for 4 new drivers. And that's not happening. The one thing you can say maybe back in the early 2000s when you had HRT, Virgin, Marussia, and Cater and Team Lotus, yes, they were languishing at the back, but they were giving opportunities to drivers who might not have been able to get a chance on the F1 grid. And if we can find a way of bolstering the grid, I'm all for it. And 3-car grid, 3-car teams is the way forward. I mean, you already, you'd see who'd be in each third seat. I mean, Schumacher would probably go up to Ferrari and be in a third seat. Giovinazzi would probably still be on the grid. Piastri would get his shot at Alpine. You'd see, a Mercedes with a third driver. Maybe Bottas would still be at Mercedes, and there'd be a Russell in that third car. The opportunities would be endless. It's a nice thought to have, and I think it would be amazing. But knowing how Formula One works, I just don't see it happening.
No, there'd probably have to be a commitment from F1 to allow the teams to sort of fund that, because, we see teams these days, even in a budget cap era, struggling to put 2 cars on the grid, let alone a third one. So it's a nice pipe dream to have, but unfortunately, I agree, I can't really see it happening unless something fundamentally changes to sort of help that along. Seeing as we're on the topic of F1, obvious question to start with, what have you made of the 2022 season so far, Harry? Do you like the new cars? Because so far, even at Monaco, whilst we didn't get too much overtaking, the cars still showed that they were able to follow each other a lot more closely, and the fans' overall perception seems to be quite good so far.
Yeah, and I think I was holding out for Spain. I was cautiously optimistic until we got to the Spanish Grand Prix, just to see exactly how these new regulations had worked, because the tracks previous to that are so kind of unique and very track specific that until we got to Spain, a track that nearly every driver knows incredibly well. We had preseason testing there. They tested there for over a decade. That's the track where really that we going to see some, action revealed, because normally it's a stale, boring race, and it wasn't too bad as Spanish Grand Prix go. So I'm still cautiously optimistic. But I like the look of the new cars. I like the fact that we've got a changed up grid. We're all, last year was great because it was Hamilton with competition at last. First time since Nico Rosberg, really, who gave him any kind of competition. Well, okay, Sebastian Vettel did a bit, but really it's been Mercedes dominance, hasn't it, for the last, since the new hybrid era. And to have not just Ferrari back up there, which I think everybody loves to see, because to quote Vettel, even if you're not a Ferrari fan, everybody's a Ferrari fan. To have, Vettel, to have Ferrari up there, to have Red Bull, both Red Bull cars in the fight, Perez up there too. The Mercedes are starting to find their form again, but you've got, Haas on improved form too, and Alfa Romeo in the hands of Bottas is unbelievable. This is what we want. We want a tight pack. You're always going to have those couple of teams that edge away into the distance, but to have that midfield pack, Alex Albon and the things he's doing in that Williams, fantastic. I think it's been great, and I think it's livened up the show. I still think there's work to do, and that was exhibited in Monaco a little bit, but of course Monaco is Monaco, and there wasn't going to be any overtaking there unless we had a rain affected race. So I'm really impressed so far, and it's been an exciting season. So, and that's all you can ask for. All I ask for is I don't care. I actually don't care who wins, as long as it's an entertaining way, a race, and an interesting one to watch.
Yeah, very much so. People that follow this podcast know that I obviously have a stake with the Ferraris. I've always supported them for a long time. I think the Schumacher factor was a big part of swaying me over, because when I first joined F1, I never really cared for the teams too much. I just saw a red Ferrari and I thought, oh yeah, I'll stick with that. And they were quite good back then, so I kind of followed that since. But obviously this season, it's a big one for Ferrari. They've finally got themselves in the picture once again for the first time realistically since 2017, 2018. it started off so well for them, and recently they have started to fall foul of a combination of a few driver errors, some mistakes on strategy, the car not quite performing either reliability, or they just didn't have the pace on certain circuits compared to Red Bull. There is already a fear now building at this point that Ferrari may be the architecture of their own downfall at this point in this battle with Red Bull, where right now they probably have to be pretty much Mercedes-like, perfect to sort of match them. So we've got this battle between Leclerc and Verstappen, Ferrari and Red Bull. Maybe Checo you can chuck in the mix as well after his recent win at Monaco. How do you see that battle unfolding? Because you've got the champion in Verstappen, you've got the new contender in Leclerc, who for the first time is really being tested. At this point, it really could go either way, but how are you judging this battle so far, Harry, and where do you see it going?
Well, long may it continue. I think Ferrari will come back fighting. I think the anger that came across in Charles Leclerc's voice at the end of the race in Monaco is indicative of what's to come there, because that Ferrari do have a little bit of a reputation for fumbling up certainly things like the strategy, and I think they will make sure now that they actually have, for the first time in a long time, a championship contender and two top-notch drivers. Leclerc has had the pace over Sainz, but don't rule out Carlos Sainz at your detriment. He's an engineer by brain, and they're the best kind of people to drive the cars, really. So he will come back fighting, and it's only a matter of time before he gets that first win. So the fact that they're able to fight tooth and nail with two Ferraris versus two Red Bulls, that's what you want. And I really hope it goes all the way down to the line, and maybe Mercedes can start to come and play and change things up a bit too. Maybe throw in the occasional, McLaren Alpine surprise. That sets it up for a nice 2022 season, I think, and one that everybody would be like, yeah, great. Regulations have worked. That's brilliant. Ferrari are there back on top, racing with Red Bull, who, remember, are more recently experienced with how to win races than Ferrari are. How to win championships than Ferrari are. And Ferrari have this interesting scenario where they're going to have to balance their drivers. At the moment, there is no number one and number two, but there's a lot of calls for Leclerc to be their natural number one, because he was a Ferrari young driver, and Carlos Sainz has come into the team later. But the year that Sainz had last year put Leclerc in the shade, and suddenly, people were asking questions. Now it's flipped back, and Leclerc's had the dominance over Sainz. So should Ferrari switch allegiances? They've got a history of having a number one, number two driver. At the moment, they're playing it fairly even, but that's going to be an interesting talking point, I think, coming into the next few races. When do they decide, well, Leclerc's our championship hope here, we've got to prioritize him? So I think the inner politics, as ever with Ferrari, is going to play a really crucial part, whereas Red Bull have kind of made it clear it's Verstappen. If Verstappen's in front, Verstappen's winning.
Yeah, I agree with that, because I asked a question on my last podcast reviewing the Monaco race, and I put forward the idea that because of the way the championship currently sits at the moment, and owing to the team orders that Red Bull have already initiated with Verstappen and Perez, they're in a position right now where they either have to consistently go with that avenue and keep backing Max, or allow Checo, in this rich vein of form that he's found himself in, to sort of find his way back into it, because points-wise, he is right back into it. So you almost feel like Red Bull are going to continue with that, and that seemed to be the response that I was getting back from people listening in, that was going to continue. Whereas Ferrari, they often sort of dance around this issue. They don't want to name a number one and a number two, but yet there are certain things that they did, particularly in 2018, I think it was. I remember back to Monaco in 2017, actually, where they did dance around that idea, but then, of course, they had that strategy, which allowed Vettel to overtake Raikkonen and win that race. So Ferrari, I think they just need to be more cutthroat about it. But on the subject, going in a different direction now, on Mercedes, now I know we already touched on that, and obviously they're having some issues at the moment, and are they in the fight? Are they not in the fight? What are your thoughts on Mercedes? Do you think that they can find their way back into a position where they could potentially win races this season?
Totally. Absolutely. I mean, Monaco was a bit of a blip after Spain, but Monaco wasn't, I don't think, really ever going to be quite their track. But they certainly made a step forward in Spain. And Hamilton is slowly getting more and more to grips with this type of car. It certainly doesn't favour him. I think it more favours naturally George Russell's style of driving, which, as you can see, he's Mr. Consistent now. Forget Mr. Saturday. He's Mr. Consistent, really, constantly in the top five throughout every single race so far this year. And Hamilton not so, which is a fascinating debate. But look, Mercedes are 8-time world champions. They've gone with a really radical design. You know, they've got that no side pod design. They haven't backtracked on that yet, and they can't really, because, well, they've just got to make it work and start to develop, a way around it, perhaps into the rest of the season and next year, certainly, because now we've had the revolution. Now it will be just evolution until the next big set of regulation changes. But I certainly think they'll come back fighting in Azerbaijan, particularly with the long straights and some of the fast corners there. The slow corners might catch them out a little bit, as we saw in Monaco. But once we get past, Canada, that's a Lewis Hamilton track, and he's going to want to show some performance there. I think certainly podiums and wins by the end of the season for Mercedes. I would be shocked if they didn't have at least a few podiums to their name, which is bizarre. Think about this time last year, us chatting about this, and now, God, Mercedes, where are they? Not even, they're already having podiums, of course, but on the regular basis, they should be winning, as they should be dominating and up there, but they're not, and that's to Formula One's benefit at the moment, because it's providing some great entertainment and a great storyline of them fighting their way back to the front. It's the ultimate test of, the engineers working with the mechanics, working with the factory, working with the drivers. It's the bare bones of Formula One. They've got to get back up to speed, and it's great to watch.
Yeah, and I agree. And it's not something that just comes about so easily, because we've seen Ferrari and Red Bull go through similar phases, and it's taken Ferrari almost 5 years to produce a car that was capable of competing for a world championship. And Red Bull, it took them almost all of the turbo hybrid era to go from a championship winning team, from a team that was third best most of the time, to back to a position where they could fight for a world championship, ultimately culminating in one, controversially, but ultimately did get one in the end anyway. So it's an interesting story with Mercedes. I certainly hope, as an F1 fan, that they can find their way back to a position where we have 6 cars at least fighting for race wins. And maybe not a championship this year, but certainly in a fine position to put themselves in the hunt for years to come. Is there a driver that, and this completely sideways question, but is there a driver right now that isn't in one of the top 3 teams that you would like to see competing for race wins on a regular basis? Because there's one that comes to mind for me, but I'm interested to know if there's one in that field that you'd like to see in that hunt as well.
It'll be Pierre Gasly. He deserves a top seat. I think he's bounced back from his pretty detrimental time at Red Bull. He deserves that. He deserves a top seat somewhere. And I don't know. I have no idea how that's going to pan out, whether he stays at AlphaTauri. I think they'd want to keep him on board, actually. I think that team is slowly becoming more of we'll have one experienced guy and we'll bring our junior in alongside them. But how long will Gasly want to be there? Where does he go? He should be in a top seat. He's one of the names I think should be considered as a Hamilton replacement when Hamilton does eventually decide to call it a day. I think they'd be a fool not to bring on somebody like Gasly.
Yeah, it certainly lends itself to wondering where he's going to be. I mean, there's opportunity, definitely. I was looking at seats possibly at Aston Martin maybe, or Alpine perhaps, or maybe even McLaren, of course, with the situation with Danny Ricciardo at the moment seeming quite unsure. I was sort of leaning towards Lando Norris a little bit. I think particularly the last few races where he's been a bit unwell with tonsillitis, and he's still been able to put together some great performances. And you could argue that whether or not this car genuinely should be as far fighting, not necessarily Mercedes at the moment because of the step they've taken forward in Spain, but fighting at the front of the midfield. That's a driver I would like to see perhaps Mercedes have a look at as well. If they're drawing up a shortlist for Hamilton replacements, I think Lando Norris has to be right up there, like with Pierre Gasly as well.
Certainly, but I would argue that Lando Norris, well, at the moment, obviously McLaren is not a top team, but they certainly last year were very much fighting in and amongst it. Whereas Gasly has he's in a, you wouldn't expect AlphaTauri to really be fighting where McLaren are. They're a solid midfield. Norris is absolutely exceptional, completely, but I have faith that McLaren will come good, and if they don't, they risk losing Norris to a higher placed team. But Norris doesn't really have too many options. He signed this long year deal with McLaren. He's spearheading that team at the moment. He likes it there. They got a great relationship. He certainly had other offers being sniffed around, but he decided to stay at McLaren because they can clearly offer him things that perhaps others can't. So in that was why I probably didn't choose Norris, but it's a good point. And I can't, Norris is getting the best out of that car at the moment. I read somewhere today that the gap between Norris and Ricciardo is larger than the gap in qualifying. This is larger than the gap between Schumacher and Mazepin was when they were together, and that I think that just justifies how on it Lando Norris is at the moment, and how these are troubling times for Daniel Ricciardo.
And that is quite a worrying statistic, because this is talking about a driver, Ricciardo, that we often used to associate as being a bit of one of the better qualifiers in the field, and now to be seen qualifying in that regard, and his race pace has been better, but as you said, it could ultimately come down with Lando if McLaren can provide him with a car good enough. I certainly believe that McLaren is his preferred destination, but of course in the years to come, when opportunities arise, if McLaren can't give him what he needs, I wouldn't be surprised if a few teams at the top tried to tempt him elsewhere. A few other questions before we sort of sign off, Harry. One that I'm going to borrow from the Motormouth podcast, if I may. Does Harry Benjamin have any hidden talents that none of us mere mortals fans know about?
I hate being asked questions. Much rather ask them. I mean, I can. I'm a very good skier. I sing a bit. I can move my ears, but also my forehead kind of moves as well. But I can sort of move my ear.
I can see Harry's moving his ears. For those of you listening on the audio only version, he's definitely moving his ears.
Check out the video; it's priceless.
There you go.
I mean, those are probably my kind of hidden talents. Maybe. It's a tough question to ask, I would say. What's your hidden talent?
I can play guitar. I've been doing that.
Oh, there you go. You're part of, come join the band. There we go. The Motormouth band getting bigger and bigger every day.
Well, if you need a guitarist, just hit me up, Harry. I'm certainly available. So, sounds like a good idea. Okay, great. Well, one more question I did want to ask before we do sign off, Harry, is obviously you've done presenting, you've done commentary, you've done interviews as well. Do you have a bucket list person that you want to interview? And it doesn't have to be F1 or motorsport. It could be anyone. And why would you want to interview them?
I mean, I've had the privilege of actually interviewing some amazing people like Nico Rosberg, Mario Andretti, Gerhard Berger in the last, years. It's quite surreal, really, to think they were, just on my computer chatting through Zoom. I would love to interview Lewis Hamilton one day. I would love to, or just to speak to the man. He's just on another level. And equally, someone like Valentino Rossi. Outside of motorsport, that's a tough one, really, because your life kind of becomes motorsport, really, when you work in it. But there's a few actors who I'd love to pick their brains of, but I have to say it would be Lewis Hamilton or Valentino Rossi, just to have a sit down with them and discuss things and their life and career. That's and actually Sebastian Vettel. I would love to talk to Sebastian Vettel. Though one of those three, I can't pick one. All three.
Yeah, it'd probably be something that'd be quite easy to, not easy to arrange, obviously, but it'd probably one you could probably sit the three of them down together and it'd just be a good old chat. That'd be a fun one. As someone asked you who'd be your ideal dinner party, those are probably three of the names that a lot of people
that would be a great dinner party, I think. Yeah. That'd be great.
And they'd all blend pretty well. It wouldn't be like you get different personalities clashing. They'd probably all blend quite well. So probably be quite good. What would you serve them, Harry, if you were going to cook for them?
Oh God, I wouldn't feel worthy just sitting there with those three. I think, Hamilton's vegan, isn't he? So you'd have to either give him something different, or you'd all have to be vegan. Probably some sort of, I don't know. I think we'd probably have steak, and he can have a vegan vegan bolognese.
It's ask him to bring a packed lunch politely. So I don't know how to cook vegan food.
You bring your own food, mate. We'll have the steak.
Yeah, well, he seems a nice enough guy. He probably would go ahead with that. It'd be fine. Well, Vettel will probably cook for you guys anyway and just bring it all in Tupperware. Be that kind of guy.
Perfect. Either way.
Yeah, that sounds great. That's all we got time for, Harry. I really, really appreciate you coming on and obviously putting up with some of my questions as well. For the benefit of our listeners that, for some reason, haven't heard of you yet or haven't seen your broadcasting, where can they find you on social media?
You can find me at I am Harry Benjamin on pretty much everything. TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, whatever. You can find me there.
And of course, hosting the Motormouth podcast as well. Definitely check that out. Again, for those who haven't heard Motormouth podcast, where can they find that?
It's on all good podcast players. Just search the Motormouth podcast.
Brilliant stuff. Guys, of course, if you have enjoyed the episode, please do remember to give it a like and consider subscribing to the channel. And of course, we've got a little bit of a break now for a few days before we come back with our Azerbaijan preview. So certainly going to be looking out for that one at some point next week. But of course, guys, until next time, please stay safe, please take care, enjoy the rest of the bank holiday if you're celebrating in the UK, or if you're observing abroad, enjoy it as well. And until next time, we'll see you in the next episode of the DNF1 F1 podcast. Take care.